Carl, I want to thank you so much for being with us. For my listeners, you guys know him as the writer of Jaws, but if you want to know anything about Jaws, I highly suggest you go pick up Carl's book, The Jaws Log. You can pick it up on Amazon, or I'm pretty sure that we'll have a link that you can order it right from Carl and maybe get it autographed, right?
Yep.
All right. So as I told you in the lead up to this, I don't want to talk about Jaws. Jaws was a good movie, don't get me wrong, but you strike me as a man who is kind of tired of talking about Jaws.
I don't even call it Jaws anymore. I call it the fish movie.
I will say this, and this is all I'm going to say about the movie. There is a lot of respect that has to go into appreciating that movie in general, because it really did change how we think of special effects and how we expect stories to be told on the screen.
Yeah.
So that's it. We're done with the fish movie. We're moving on. Growing up in New York through World War II, what was it about the entertainment industry that inspired you to study drama at Syracuse?
Well, I was always a verbal kid. I had a lot of verbal skills. I scored high in my, tests. I won a prize for composition on graduation from high school. I was editor of the yearbook. I always was comfortable doing. This background is distracting to me. Sorry. I think I'll go back to nothing.
Okay. You want to pick back up and start fresh with the question? I'll ask you again. Okay.
I'll just. My background will just change abruptly in the middle of your interview. So anyway, I grew up in Manhattan, and I went to the theater when I was a kid. I started going to the theater when it was like the golden age of Broadway. I saw like Yul Brynner do The King and I saw wonderful productions, and I was funny. What happened?
I'm still here.
Huh. Yeah, something's gone awry. Okay. So I was always clever and verbal, and I was there. And when I went to Syracuse, I majored in theater and journalism. Exercising both of the areas in which I was strong. And I got a degree in speech and dramatic arts, and I made a little resolution to myself when I graduated that if it was at all possible, I was never going to work in one of those little stopgap jobs. I wasn't going to be, an office temp or a cab driver or a merchant seaman or,
a waiter.
Yeah, I'm just going to work in the theater or writing. And luckily, one job led to another, and I was employed first as in a technical capacity. I was a stage manager, and I worked as a stage manager, and then other times, just one thing led to another. And then the next thing you knew, there was the iconic movie and a lot of other things that I did, and then The Jerk. So I was very lucky in my choice of collaborators, or collaborators who chose me. So it seemed like a natural progression, although I understand it was, not common for everybody to stumble from one job into another. But I earned a living doing theater or writing. So,
was there a defining moment or a particular piece of media that basically grabbed your attention and like stuck with you and made you want to pursue those things?
Nope. I just generally wanted to be in or around the theater or the press, and I got jobs, doing that. So.
What was it about the theater that piqued your interest?
Have you ever performed live?
Yes.
Do you know that rush that you get from an audience?
Yeah, better than any drug on the market.
Exactly.
Understand it well. Um, I've had to do this in front of live people, and I was a part of high school plays and stuff like that, and
Sure.
it bit me, and I went a different way with it.
Well, you know, had the
um,
technology been there, who knows? I might be sitting in your seat interviewing somebody else.
yeah, well, I'm glad you aren't. Um, so you served as the entertainment specialist from 61 to 63. You were drafted into the special service branch of the Army. What were some of the duties entailed in that position, and how much of a learning experience was that time?
Well, it wasn't much of a learning experience. I already knew how to make my bed and get along with people, which is the big advantage of the Army. But uh, my job was, the entertainment specialists generally, you handed out ping pong paddles at the service club, you ran the library, might have been a projectionist at the theater showing movies. Uh, and in my case, I didn't last too long in special services. I had a disagreement with the commanding officer of that division, and he sent me down to a training regiment at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, which was supposed to be like a bad deal because you were, as they say, pushing troops, which meant you had to wake up when the troops woke up, and you had to follow training cycles. But it worked out fine because I was a company clerk. I had a semi-private room in a barracks instead of a barracks. I was worked in the day room doing paperwork for the executive officer and the commanding officer, and it was if you were going to be in the Army, it was a good way to be there. Company clerks have a lot of latitude in how they schedule their time, and as long as the work gets done, people leave you alone, and that was fine with me.
Do your job, nobody bothers you.
Right.
You joined the Writers Guild in 68, and you assisted writers during the strikes in the 70s and in 81, which eventually led to being elected board of directors for the Guild.
Hmm.
What were some of the toughest hurdles you had to work through?
Well, in 1988, I was co-chair of the negotiating committee in the longest strike in our history, in Writers Guild history. And that kind of changed the face of popular entertainment. In 1988-89 season, there were no dramatic shows debuting on the air because they weren't written.
Mm-hmm.
So the networks shifted to reality programming, which was cheaper, and that was all the wedge that they needed to drive reality programming to the forefront. And now, we divide our time between reality programming and fictional programming. And,
I feel the need to put air quotes, reality.
yeah, it's a very manipulated reality, but yes.
How did it help shape your writing or the handling of writers moving forward?
Well, because I had worked in almost every area where you could work as a writer. I worked on variety television. I worked on sitcoms. I worked. Well, that's all there was in those days. I worked on feature films. Whatever kind of writing there was to do, I did it. And it gave me an insight into how I could serve other writers who were experiencing the same problems, and it became a question of giving back to the Guild. The Guild had done very well by me, so I decided to do what I could to. It sounds kind of treacly or saccharine, but I wanted to give back to the community of writers, so I did.
Well, I mean, being a writer yourself and having to jump through whatever hurdles or hoops that you did to break into the business, it makes sense that you would want to maybe try to clear the way or smooth the path for future writers.
Yeah.
Any insight on the underlying causes of those strikes or subsequent strikes after that?
Oh, it's really simple. The greedheads want more and they want to pay you less. All labor management decisions boil down to those essentials. They want to pay you less, we want more. Samuel Gompers said that once when they were signing the AFL-CIO. Somebody asked Gompers, what do you want? And he said, more.
I mean, and to be fair, I can kind of see it because without writers, you don't really have anything. Even the reality shows need writers.
Oh, yeah, yeah. If it ain't on the stage, if it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage.
Yep. And you brought it up, and we'll get into it a little bit later, but your list of writing credits is so impressive. Like, someone in my generation isn't probably supposed to know of all the shows that you were on, but I do. Was brought up by my grandparents predominantly, so the variety shows and things like that, like Flip Wilson and the Smothers Brothers, the Dean Martin showcase, and then the Odd Couple and things like that. So I intend to bring those up a little bit later, but I did want to at least say that your career is an impressive one.
I took whatever job came along. There's two approaches to working in show business. And there's two actors who typify those approaches. There's Dustin Hoffman, who waited for years for his first break, and after The Graduate,
Yeah.
he was deluged with offers to play variations of the same character. And he held out. He turned down a lot of jobs until Ratso Rizzo came along, and he did something that was really different and established his depth as an actor. That's one kind of actor, where you wait for the right part, however long it takes. The other is my dear friend Terry Garr, who took every job that came along. She was, first she was a dancer. She danced. She was one of the David Winters dancers. You can see her in the background on old 60s shows like Shindig and Hullabaloo. There's Terry Garr dancing. And then those led to better parts, and then Mel Brooks hired her for Young Frankenstein, and then she did Tootsie. She did a wonderful job, and Tootsie got nominated for an Academy Award. And she took every job that came along, and did equally well. So there's two approaches, and actors can take either one, or they can vary. They can wait for the right part, or they can just take a job because it's there, and make some money. And Michael Caine, bought a house for his mother with what he made on Jaws 4, which was strictly for the money. I've never seen Jaws 4. It's the one sequel I've never seen.
I've always felt that if I were an actor, I would probably take that second approach. That's the, as I know it, the Samuel L. Jackson approach. If there's a paycheck, I'm in it.
Yeah. Yep.
Which Way Was Up is a remake of an Italian comedy film, The Seduction of Mimi, which I'm not sure many people know. What challenges, if any, did you face adapting it for an American audience? Well,
in Italian, it was called Mimi il Metallurgico. Mimi, it's the title role.
Right.
Mostly, the challenges, there were two sets of challenges. One was just finding parallels in America for that particular kind of class warfare and labor struggle that were common in post-war Italy, and where the Communist Party was very, very strong in Italy. The Italian communists were a huge force. And Lena Wertmüller was a very political filmmaker. So first was finding, a analogous American situation to the kind of situation that Mimi was in Italy. And agribusiness and migrant farm workers seemed to be the most vivid parallels. So I chose those. And then Richard decided he wanted to play different parts in the same movie. So we had Richard playing the old man and the hapless hero and the flamboyant preacher,
Mm-hmm.
and which he did wonderfully. And I got a chance to work with Richard writing his part. I mean, Richard kind of writes his own parts, but he was dating Pam Grier at the time. So Richard and Pam and me and my wife went off to Barbados and rented a villa, and Richard and I wrote every day for a couple of weeks, and basically broke the back of the screenplay. And then then when we came back, I finished it up, and then we shot it.
That would have been an amazing experience. I'm sure it was. Richard Pryor and Pam Grier writing in the Barbados with him.
Yep.
So I have to ask, and this is something that I noticed. So in preparation for the interview, I went back and watched some of my favorites that, you're either starring or you either act in or you've written. Mm-hmm. One of the ones that I went back and I watched was Johnny Dangerously.
Oh, yeah.
I absolutely love Johnny Dangerously. I love that style of comedy. There's been a huge change in film and TV since you started your career.
God knows.
With movies specifically like Johnny Dangerously and The Jerk, they rely heavily on old school vaudeville techniques. I.e., for those that don't know what I'm talking about, skits sewn together with plot. Do you think that the newer generations of writers don't have enough appreciation for the vaudeville roots of comedy?
Yes, and that's only because they're unaware of them. I mean, I grew up, well, first of all, I'm old, so I remember, post-war, I remember radio comedy. I mean, I remember when there was no television.
Right.
There was no Milton Berle.
Well, yeah, because you were born in 1938, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I came of age in the late 40s, and that was radio time, not television. And then in the 50s, when television came in, my family didn't even have a television set. We went across the hall to our neighbors in the apartment house who did have a television set, and that's where I would watch Howdy Doody in the afternoon. And then on Sunday evening, we watched a Colgate Comedy Hour, and on Tuesday night, we'd watch Milton Berle. And in those days, it was all a shared experience, and the ratings reflected it. In those days, if you had a successful TV show in a 3-network universe, you had 30, 40 million viewers a week.
Right. Well,
gone forever.
What I think it is, and like I said, Mel Brooks does this, and it's evident in your movies that you've worked on in some fashion. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of sight gags. There's a lot of commentary about the social situations of that time. And movies, this is where I sound like an old man. Movies just aren't what they used to be. TV just isn't what it used to be.
No. Well, the part of it is in defense of fragmentation. Since the opportunity for that huge audience doesn't exist anymore, you can narrowcast. You can target your material to a much smaller audience. So,
I see it. I don't think it was the smart move, but then again, I'm just a nobody in Detroit. I'm not in Hollywood.
No, but listen, to this day, a breakout hit is a breakout hit. If something has that indefinable something that catches the public attention, then it's a hit. But we can't, nobody can predict that. That's after the fact. You have to just make the best show you can and hope that it finds an audience.
Well, I'm the oldest member that lives in my house. Everyone else is either 10 or 20 years younger than me. And I make it my duty to show them these movies.
Good for you.
Because they'll sit there and they'll be like, I've never heard of this. What are you watching? And then they'll laugh their asses off for the entire run of the film. And they're like, I'd never seen that before. Where did that come from? I was like, the past. That's where it came from.
Well, welcome to the world.
What did you enjoy or dislike about your time co-writing the two autobiographies with David Crosby?
Oh, there's nothing to not enjoy. The first one was written during the writer's strike of '88, and I was lucky I had a job. We got a huge advance for that book, so we were able to write at our leisure. I didn't have any uh, demands on my time other than the negotiations at the Writers Guild, but we were in a strike, so those were kind of suspended. So Crosby and I could go off and write, and it was fun. If you've seen the book, it has a kind of a novel approach to autobiography. It's rare that an autobiography has two authors, and I insisted that it not be as told to or with. I was going to be co-author with David. And there's a typographical style to what we did that echoes, let's see if I have a copy of it. Yeah, here.
Okay.
You'll notice, you probably went by too fast, but there's three different typefaces in that book. One is a normal typeface, which is Crosby's first person narrative of his life. I was born, I went to school, I did this, I did that, based on long interviews. Then there's a second voice, which is people I interviewed for the book who gave me their insights, and I transcribed all those interviews and I included them, and they're in a separate typeface indicating that they are someone's reminiscence or someone else's version of events. And then finally there's a boldface type, which is me, the omniscient author, describing putting it in context with history and the times and whatever else was going on.
Almost sounds like you wrote it as a screenplay.
Well, I was an omniscient narrator, making sure that nobody missed anything in Crosby's words.
So why two of them, though?
Well, after the first one was written after Crosby had gone to jail and done time in Texas. The second one, just so much happened that we had to pay attention to it.
All right, so while we're on the topic of writing, your own book with Tony Attell, The Little Blue Book for Filmmakers, a primer for directors, writers, actors, and producers. It's a straight-laced, well-planned guide to early struggles to expect in all these portions of the film industry. What was the most important piece of knowledge you wanted to impart on future filmmakers?
There's a table in the book of how to give notes, and it has almost every note you could possibly give an actor, with the note, the utilitarian, no bullshit, kind of callous, direct quote. Don't do that. Talk louder.
Right.
That's one. And the other way is a little more nuanced that says, perhaps if you did this, you could find out that, in which you spare the actor's feelings, but at the same time, you do get across what it is you need to communicate. So and it's in convenient table form, and it's very nice. And there's sections on budgeting, and everything in it is useful, although the industry has been changing, and we should probably do an update one of these days, but I don't know if we ever will. It's not selling well enough to justify a second edition.
Well, it sounds like that last one is the you catch more flies with honey approach.
Yeah.
Are actors notoriously hard to give direction to? I'm not saying for any specific names or anything like that.
So, no, actors are all individuals, but they tend to fall into groups. There are the professionals who, approach it as a job. There are those who, see it as an art form. There are those who see it as a vehicle for self-expression. And you have to accommodate yourself to all those different drives and motivations that are propelling your actors. They all bring something different to the table. And if you're managing a large production, a big movie, for example, you've got, you might have 30 or 40 actors that need to be dealt with over the course of, 9 weeks of production. Other times it's a lot simpler, just, a few actors, a limited number of sets. That makes it a different ball game, in which you can be more collaborative and take time to explore alternatives. When under the strictures of a shooting schedule, you might not be able to explore all the possibilities.
In other words, it sounds like it would be prudent for directors to get to know their actors so they know what archetype they're dealing with.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Some of the times when you do extensive casting, when you've interviewed a lot of actors for the parts, you'll have an idea of what's out there. Sometimes, you an actor only by reputation, and you say, your producer says, who would be good for this part? Samuel L. Jackson. And you go, yeah, he'd be perfect. Let's get an offer out to him. And I've never met him, but I know his work. And then when he comes on the set, I can say, I know your work. Is there anything special we should talk to each other about before we begin? And then you try to accommodate that actor, even though you don't know him or her personally.
While we're talking about it, who's been your favorite actor to work with over the years?
Steve Martin, very conscientious, very, very professional. And Terry Garr, of course. And I don't think I've ever worked with Tom Hanks. I worked with his wife, but not with him. Dreyfuss, Shaw. I mean, all the guys in Jaws, I was particularly close to.
Yeah, but your eyes lit up when you said Steve Martin a little bit.
Oh, it's incoming call. Who's this? It's going to go to answers.
Call from Steuben Beverly.
It's going to go to voicemail.
Give it a minute to finish ringing.
Call from Steuben Beverly.
I call Beverly 2022. So younger than Happy New Year. Bye.
Okay.
Steve Martin actually seems like he'd be a hoot to work with, but like a sophisticated hoot. And always.
The thing you have to remember about Steve Martin, he is not a wild and crazy guy.
No.
He's very methodical and professional. And a lot of people even find him dour. And, what's wrong with him? He just concentrates on the work. And when he's performing, that's when he goes quietly or not so quietly insane and gives you, any degree of, wonderful behaviors. But other times when he's just thinking about the work, he's just deadly serious and enjoys the physical challenges of balancing props and costumes and performing.
I just watched the show that he and Martin Short were in on Hulu, Only Murders in the Building.
Oh, yeah.
And I follow him on social media, too. I think for most people outsider looking in, he'd be a weird dude, but like he's very smart.
Yep.
And his funny when it's not like for TV or movies or anything, his funny is very smart.
Yep.
And I have to appreciate that. I also say the same thing about your writing and the comedy that you put into your movies as well. It's very smart because you have to be paying attention.
Yeah, I mean, in any writing job, there's things that you do that are required by the script, and you have to do exposition, you have to do dialogue, but then as you get into it, you get a chance to exercise your personal proclivities, and you put in what you think is funny, and you try to get a laugh that way. And in a perfect world, everybody gets the plot and the story and the characters, and because it's a perfect world, they appreciate all the subtleties in your dialogue. But sometimes they don't, and they're lost. I got it out. I got it on the paper. Director managed to get it on the set and on the screen. After that, it's up to the audience.
Right. My hands are clean. I'm done. You served on the faculty for the film division of the School of Arts at Columbia, the American Film Institute, University of Miami School of Communications, the University of Southern California School of Cinema and Television. Do any one of those schools stand out as being more beneficial to your career than others?
No.
Okay. What are 3 takeaways then from your time with those institutions?
It's amazing how many original screenplays by graduate students are all about a misunderstood young person in their early 20s.
Well, what do they say? Write what you know?
Yeah, and graduates, graduate students and seniors in screenwriting programs tend to be movie nerds or who don't know much else outside of their world.
Hi.
And when you find somebody who has enough background in other stuff to actually give you an interesting insight into the world of trucking or some other wherever the film is set, you go, wow, this is I appreciate that, but you go a long time between student scripts till you find those.
Yeah. I noticed an uncredited role in the 1973 Robert Altman film, The Long Goodbye, starring Elliot Gould. And for my listeners, it's a fantastic crime noir film, and I highly recommend you check it out if you've never seen it. Were you involved in the production in any other way, or what led to this appearance?
I knew Altman because he had hired me for the movie of MASH. So I had done the movie of MASH, which was Altman's breakout film, because before that, he had just been a journeyman director.
Right.
He really broke out with MASH and then went on from there to, ever more interesting successes and failures. But he made, Altman was one of those guys who you never were bored at an Altman film. So he was shooting Long Goodbye, and he asked me to be in it. There was a crowd scene, and I was going to play Sterling Hayden's agent. That was my character. And it was largely improvised because that's the way Altman worked in those days. So I went to this big party scene that we filmed out in Malibu. I did my part as his agent. I ad-libbed some dialogue, but most of it was cut. So you got to look very carefully at that movie to see me, because I just go by. I think I maybe have a half a line of dialogue. So you win some, you lose some. But that was like an acting for hire, actor for hire job.
Right. You directed a single episode of a really obscure show on the USA Network in '96 called Campus Cops.
Oh yeah.
Anything fun you can tell us from the time on that project?
No, it was a fun project. It was a nice cast. I'm trying to remember if that's shot in LA or in Canada. I don't remember. But it was it was a job. It was like, I, I,
Have camera, will shoot.
yeah, I have likened myself to a professional. And to me, a professional is somebody who can be relied on to do the job on time, on budget, minimum of fuss, no temperament or personality. You do what needs to be done. I had a friend of mine who was a very high-paid executive assistant, and her slogan was, "I go where I'm needed. I do what needs to be done."
It's a good
As a
slogan to
writer,
live by.
as a writer and an actor, that's what I try to do.
Yeah. And your list of credits would show you went where you were needed and did what needed to be done.
Yeah.
So I mentioned we talk about the TV and the variety shows and stuff that you were on earlier. So you worked with the Smothers Brothers and Bob Newhart and Flip Wilson and Dean Martin, with all of them being such huge comedy legends. How much freedom and creativity was allowed in those writer rooms?
Oh, lots. I mean, all you had to do was make it funny. Now, the acts themselves would sometimes be their own worst enemies. And when we were working on the Smothers show, I was partners with Lorenzo Music, and we were also writing partners on the Glenn Campbell show. But on the Smothers show, Lorenzo and I did a lot of the Smothers, in one monologues. And for the first couple of years of their show, they cannibalized their act, and everything they did was from their act, so they were confident in the material. Now we were doing new material, and Lorenzo and I were writing it with an eye and an ear toward making it look like they had been performing it for years. And we were pretty good at that. We could write the boys better than they could perform themselves. And if they just stuck to the script, the pieces would be entertaining and applause-worthy. And every now and then, the boys, in attempting to make the material their own, they would stray off the script and wing it a little bit, because that's how they worked for their whole career. But when they were tempted to go off book, 90% of the time it wasn't as good as if they stayed with the script. So you're sitting there in the green room watching the run through, and you're going, why are they doing that? Why don't they just say the words as written? Trust the material. But it's hard. I mean, when you're a performer like the Smothers Brothers, you know what works for you. You've built a whole career out of your onstage persona, and you become very conservative. You're not really willing to try new material, and it takes a little trust to say words that you haven't proved are successful.
Well, I think you proved it. You won a shared Emmy for Outstanding Writing Achievement in Comedy, Variety, and Music in '69 for the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. So I think they should have just trusted what was on the page.
Yeah. My point exactly.
So Caveman is a movie a lot of people don't know about, at least in my generation, unfortunately.
Oh, your loss, not mine.
No, I know it. Their loss.
Yeah.
It's a shame, because it really is a great piece of comedic film. My first question is how were you able to get Ringo involved?
Well, we were. I had two really experienced producers, Larry Terman and David Foster and Larry Terman, and it was kind of written on demand. Warner Brothers. The origination of that was Larry Terman said, "Do you remember 1 Million BC?" I said, "Well, the black and white version or the Raquel Welch fur bikini version?" She said, "Either one." Says, "We want to do the same thing, only funny." I said, "Okay, there's an idea," and we went with that. And I wrote a couple of versions of it that were, I think, a little too smart. And then they decided they needed more of a slapstick element, so they asked me if I would consider teaming up with Rudy DeLuca, who was one of Mel Brooks's writers.
Right.
And Rudy had a sense of, physical comedy and all that. So I said, okay, because it was in my contract that if we the movie was greenlit, I would direct. So it was writing and directing. So that's what I wanted to do. So Rudy worked with me. We did a couple of drafts of the script, and the studio chose to greenlight one of the drafts that Rudy and I did together and make it. And I remember calling Rudy and saying, great news, we got a green light on our script. And then I said, and in the other good news division is I'm approved as director. And I heard this like frost on the other end of the line. And apparently Rudy's agents had told him to convince him to work for short money, that if the picture was made, he would get to direct.
Mm.
So it came as a blow to him that I would. So he said, what about the two of us directing? And I said, I don't think that's a good idea. It might work for Joel and Ethan Coen. It's not going to work for us. So no, I'm not going to share directing credit. So he sulked, and we didn't talk for a while. But ultimately, the movie got made, and I thought it was a credit to everybody who was in it. Now, your question, how do we come upon Ringo? Well, when we were casting the lead, it was important that the lead actor be kind of a nebbishy guy, not a leading man type. So when you're looking around for small, nebbishy actors, it was like Dudley Moore and Ringo. There wasn't anybody else. and Dudley passed, so we went to Ringo, and Ringo said yes. So I called Richard Lester in London, and I said, I'm going to be working with Ringo. Is there anything I should know? And Richard Lester gave me some hints about how to work with Ringo. And the rest was history.
What was the actor's reaction to having to do a film predominantly in pantomime?
Well, we had a script. It looked just like a script. But wherever there was dialogue, I would type the English dialogue that was the subtext of what was being said. And then in the parentheticals, I would always say, grunts as if to say, and then I would have the English dialogue so the actors would know what the spirit of the scene was about. So it looked like a script. It had dialogue and character names and everything. So you could read it like a script. And then when you shot it, you had to remember, oh, right, they're not going to be talking English. They're going to be talking rock talk.
I thought for sure, too, when they met up with the other tribe where they had a couple of members that could speak a little bit of English, I'm like, okay, we're going to switch. They're going to learn. And no, straight on with the pantomime and the grunt talk, and I was there for it. I loved every minute of it.
It did work out fine. And we were very lucky. We got an actor, John Matuzak, who could grunt as expressively as anybody. He was a natural actor.
And then my last question about Caveman: why is the theme song so damn catchy?
You gotta thank Lalo Schifrin for that. We were we were shooting in Mexico, and we needed the score, and Lalo was doing the score, and he was busy. He was working a lot. So he came to Mexico to record the score. And somebody said, you could record this in L.A. or London with an orchestra. He said, no, I don't want to pass up the chance to be present at the birth of music, which is what that scene was about.
Yeah. It is. It's super catchy. It's an earworm.
Yeah.
To the point, I don't know if you know this or not, you can find that song on Spotify.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it is there, and it is in my playlist, and my friend that watched the movie with me has put it into their playlist as well.
Right.
So
that's good to know. Lalo would be happy to hear that.
How did the character of Iron Balls McGinty come to be in The Jerk?
Well, originally it was just three hoodlums. Me, Lenny Montana, and Gene LaBelle, who was a stuntman. And we were just going to be threatening hoods. And then when Carl Reiner was staging the scene, he decided to, when they say we're going to keep is out, and Stephen says, "Sir, sir, I,"
Yeah.
and then the fight breaks out, and the kick in the balls was kind of like an afterthought when we were staging the fight. So they fitted me with a cup and some padding, and the stunt guy showed me how to take a full-out kick in the groin. There's a trick to it. And Steve, who's physically very, very adroit, did the kick. And the joke came around in post-production because the next cut after the kick is Bernadette saying to Steve, "Oh, you had no, honey, you don't feel so bad. You had no way of knowing that was Iron Balls, McGinty." And they put in this heavy clank when the kick happened. They added a clank to the soundtrack. So my character is defined by a sound effect. Clank.
Did you have any creative input on the jerk?
Yeah, I would. I was welcome on the set, and I could suggest anything that came to mind, and they would either take it or leave it. Like Carl Reiner was a great collaborator, and Carl and Steve had a great rapport during the film. They lived down the block from each other. They could talk about the film, after hours. So, and Steve at that time was dating Bernadette. So it worked. Worked on many levels.
Do you feel being a character actor is sometimes more fun than being the leading man type?
Well, I've never been a leading man, so I wouldn't know. But I imagine being a character actor is great because all you have to do is your character. And you go back to your trailer or to your dressing room and you wait till they call you out to do the next scene. And you can, have free lunch and, schmooze with the other actors. It's quiet
networking.
Life. But as a leading man, you've got a lot more to do. First of all, you have to look good, which means paying attention to your diet and discipline and doing everything you need to do to stay handsome and attractive. And then that leads to vanity and self-centeredness and a lot of the sins that actors are blamed for, self-absorption, self-centeredness.
What's one leading? First off, before I ask this question, let me preface it with the another one. Have you ever wanted to be the leading man?
Well, sure. Everybody wants to be a leading man. I mean, in the movie in your head, you see yourself as a leading man. In my dreams, where I am, conquering all kinds of villains and flying or doing whatever one does in one's dream, I'm the leading man. But I'm enough of a realist to know that I'm not the physical type for a leading man. Never have been. So it's an area. It's like playing the tuba. I probably could, but I don't know how, and I never will. So it becomes an abstract ideal. Oh, if only I could play the tuba. Oh, if only I could be a leading man. Well, I don't know.
Did you ever try going out for a leading role?
Yeah.
No? Okay. Then we will move on. Dr. Detroit is a cult classic movie. You were a co-writer on that. It's a wild movie. Were there any great bits that got left out that you or your other co-writer were sad to see cut?
Yes.
Can you tell me what they were?
Sure. And I kind of blame Michael Pressman, who is not really a comedy director. He made his bones on picket fences and a lot of, and the only reason he was the director of Dr. Detroit was because he had just done a comedy with Richard Pryor called Some Kind of Hero, which hadn't been released yet. So everybody thought he was a comedy genius. And then while we were starting Dr. Detroit, Some Kind of Hero came out and was the lowest grossing Richard Pryor picture of all time. and it was a total fucking dud. And all of a sudden, his credentials as a comedy director were suspect. But by that time, it was too late. He was directing, and it was a comedy, and I was there to try to make it funny. And
You know,
I had a gag. I had a wonderful gag where there was a chase in a auto junkyard with dueling forklifts.
Hmm.
And I had a scene where our hero, Dan Aykroyd, is driving a forklift, and he drives it right into Mom's limousine and pulls hoist, intending to lift the limousine and to ferry it over and dump it. But because the limo is so heavy, when he pulls, he drives the forklift into it, pulls the levers up, and instead of the car stays planted firmly on the ground, and the forklift goes up in the air. See? Funny gag.
Yeah.
Good visual. Michael didn't get it. He just did not understand it.
You know, it's funny
He
that
couldn't
you.
see it. I sketched it out for him. The transportation guy said, "Oh yeah, we can rig it to do that," but it never made it into the script. Never made it onto shooting stage.
It's funny that you mentioned that the director wasn't really a comedy director, because it does feel like it's trying to be two movies at the same time.
Yeah, Michael made some interesting mistakes, and I don't think he ever repeated them because he went back to doing really quality work in television and elsewhere. But it was new for him too. It was interesting. The faculty club scenes. I had to send Michael a note. I said, Michael, all the faculty members are 20 or 30 years older than you are, but you're 45. You're writing from the viewpoint of a 25-year-old. And if that was correct, the faculty guys would be in their 50s and 60s or 50s. But because you're 40, you think that a faculty guy is going to be 30 years older than you, and that makes them 70 or 80, which is retirement age. And you've populated this movie with very old actors playing the faculty. No, we're stuck with that.
What's your favorite gag from Dr. Detroit that did make it into the movie?
Oh, when when Howard Hessman is arguing with TJ, the black actor, and they're talking about, says, my grandfather did this, and Howard says, oh yeah, well my grandfather owned your grandfather.
You know, I'm going to skip ahead real quick because you've touched on something that I had for later in the interview, or at least a little further down my list here, which we're getting close to the end too, so don't worry. But do you feel that we've gotten so wrapped up in ourselves that we can't truly appreciate comedy anymore?
Well, it's hard.
Or I could refine the question a little bit. Is funny regardless of who it offends?
Yes. There's no, you can't put boundaries on comedy. I think Gilbert Gottfried is the perfect example of that. He did a joke like the same week as 9/11.
Yeah.
And people were shouting too soon. But the fact is, it was a funny joke. So
yeah, I'm kind of the same opinion, because I think in order for comedy to be effective, it either needs to be offensive slightly, or it needs to make you feel some kind of way. If a comedy movie or a comedian up on stage makes you feel some kind of way, then they did their job.
yeah, and most of the time with comedy, it's relatively simple. If you laugh, it worked. So the test is, does the joke work? And if it does, then nobody can complain.
I've gotten into conversations with friends of mine recently because of going back and watching some of these older movies and whatnot. They're like, "Oh, well, those could never get made today," and I was like, "You're right. Unfortunately, they couldn't. You know, Mel Brooks couldn't make Blazing Saddles today and get away with it. You know,
Right.
The Jerk couldn't have gotten made today and got away with it."
Yep.
Even though it is very clearly parodying itself, and most of the funny lines about race come from the black actors,
Yeah,
it still wouldn't fly in today's market.
it's true.
And I think that's a shame. I personally feel we're too full of ourselves. We take ourselves too seriously.
That could be. I mean, everybody's looking for meaning in everything, and sometimes something is just fucking fall down funny, and you don't question it. Just have a good laugh and move on.
I don't know so much if they're looking for meaning. It feels a lot like they're looking to be offended. So who knows?
Yeah.
Amazon Women on the Moon. You directed 3 segments: the Pet House video sequence, the Son of the Invisible Man sequence, and the art sale sequence. Tell me where the inspiration for those 3 segments came from.
I also did a longer sequence that was cut, but it's in the DVD release. It's called Airborne Chekhov.
Okay.
It's Chekhov on wires. It's Chekhov, but everybody's off flying.
Well, at least for the 3 that I was able to see,
Yeah.
where did the inspiration for those 3 segments come from?
Well, the writers, Barry and was it Barry and Enright? No. I think the writers came up with those ideas,
Okay.
and I implemented them.
How much collaboration between directors took place for it?
Hardly any. Each director worked in isolation from the other directors.
Even though that there were characters from one segment that popped up in others?
Yeah, that was a post-production function of the editing.
Okay. So it wasn't specifically written with that in mind. It was just kind of an afterthought.
Yeah.
All right. Now, Amazon Women on the Moon is a great piece of comedy. It really is. Another one of those movies that I don't think, not because it was offensive really in any kind of way, but just that I don't think today's audiences would get it. You know, it's like
More's the pity. It's their loss, not mine.
Right. It's more of that old vaudeville skits sewn together with a plot type deal.
Yep.
But when I was watching it, I couldn't help but feel like it might have been the inspiration for another movie. And I was just kind of curious if I'm drawing imaginary dots or you think it helped inspire this one particular movie as well. Stay Tuned. Stay Tuned was a movie with John Ritter where he plays a very Harvey Pitnick type character that gets sucked into the TV. And has to.
I don't know the movie, so I'm not.
Okay.
Can't really comment on it.
All right. Well, if anyone else out there that's watching this or hearing this does, I fully believe that the one sequence in Amazon Women on the Moon was the inspiration for the movie Stay Tuned, and I'm gonna find out my answer one day.
What is the scene? What is the scene in Amazon Women?
It's the scene where the guy gets sucked into the TV.
Oh yeah, Lou Jacoby, the actor, right? He winds up in a hot tub.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Harvey Pitnick also, because he was kind of a schlub, you know, he would come home, he would sit in front of the TV, and that was his night. That was John Ritter's character in Stay Tuned. So Harvey Pitnick and the guy getting sucked into the TV earlier on in the movie, I really feel that was probably the inspiration. Never get my answer.
I would give a lot of credit to Woody Allen in Purple Rose of Cairo.
Yeah.
Where the characters step off the screen and into the real world, and the real characters step onto the screen and get involved in that world. And that's all goes back to Buster Keaton in a silent film called The Projectionist.
Yeah.
Where he integrates himself into the film action in very comical and very cinema-wise ways. There's a scene where his character is now left reality and has gone onto the screen, and he's leaning on a stump, and there's a camera cut to a different scene, and the stump vanishes, and the actor trips and falls because his support has just been edited out from under him.
Kind of like the old school cartoons where Daffy Duck would get in a fight with the cartoonist and they'd start erasing things.
Yeah, they start erasing things, and also the old cartoon conventions, like height is never a disadvantage until you notice it. Like you
Right.
run off the edge of a cliff, nothing happens. You look down and you go, "Oh shit!" and then you fall. You know,
I swear to God, I had one of those moments in real life. I used to hang out on the roof as a kid. It was my place to go to get away from everything. And made the mistake of trying to chat up this cute girl that was walking by. And I walked and I walked and I walked and wound up about 5 feet away from my house.
oh, gee.
Okay, so this is tying into my personal beliefs here, and then we'll get to interview roulette. Why is Hollywood so afraid of new material?
Nobody ever got fired for saying no. It's much easier to pass on a piece of material than promote it.
Okay.
Because in order to promote it, you have to kind of identify with the material and go to your bosses or financiers or whoever you're working with and say, "Hey, this is important. This is we should do this picture." And then your reward is usually associate producer or executive producer. You get to work on the movie, and that's all well and good, and you build your resume that way. But if the movie if the script is not appreciated by others, then you've staked a losing position, and there's no future for you in that company. Hey, oh schmuck, he wanted to make this dog of a movie, and so everybody who passes on a project, like I say, nobody ever got fired for saying no.
That's fair.
Ned Tannen at Universal used to aggressively say, "Yeah, I passed on Star Wars, and if it was brought to me with the same cast, with the same experience, and the same budget today, I would pass again."
And he'd still be wrong.
Yeah.
Well, how do you personally feel about remakes and reboots?
I think it reflects a paucity of imagination, a failure of vision. At least with remakes and reboots and prequels and sequels, you're pointing to something the financiers or the bosses, whoever they are, you're pointing to something they can identify with, and in its ultimate form, it's the stupid way of pitching where you say, it's Die Hard on an aircraft carrier, or it's the jerk in an old folks' home. I mean, you're just combining different, genres as a sort of a shorthand for what you want to do, and it's okay as a shortcut and as a key to understanding, but when it substitutes for imagination and creativity, then it's self-defeating. It doesn't make the industry stronger. It doesn't lead to good material. It's just, timidness.
Well, it also, it takes a lot of the art form out of movies, at least in my opinion. This is, again, just my opinion.
Well, the thing to remember about sequels, and I tell this to everybody who listen, the iron law of sequels is only the last one loses money.
Spider-Man No Way Home proved that wrong.
It's not the last Spider-Man. There'll be another Spider-Man. Only the last one loses money.
At least for this trilogy. But yeah, I guess you're right, because they're
Police Academy 12, this doesn't stop.
Yeah. I think there's only one series that stopped at 3 that, really didn't, I don't remember. The Back to the Future movies. Like, I'm pretty sure all 3 of them made money. I don't think any one of those 3 lost money for the...
No, they probably all made money. And
yeah.
if they didn't make a fourth one, it was not for lack of trying, but everybody was tired of it, I suppose.
Exceptions to the rule.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Being that you're a writer, I would assume you're an avid reader, and I can see you are from just the collection that I see behind you. Are you a purist when it comes to book to film translations, or do you understand that there needs to be a little wiggle room because what works on a page doesn't always work on a screen?
Always. I mean, Jaws is the best example of that. The fish movie is nothing but a huge job of pruning the novel, which had a lot of extraneous stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And when you cut it down to its essentials, then you get a great movie.
Okay, so yeah, I'm a bit.
Book, a book. You always ask yourself when you're adapting source material, usually a book, sometimes another movie. You've got to be faithful to the idea of that book or that movie, whether you're slavishly copying every scene. That's something else. But you have to understand what is the essence of that movie or what is the essence of that story. And that's the story that you have to tell when you're doing the rewrite.
I kind of agree. I'm a huge comic book nerd, and every time Marvel or DC releases a new movie in the internet forums and everybody online, they start griping about, well, they got this wrong, or they didn't do this, or they didn't do this, or and whatnot. And I'm of the mind where I'm just like, I'm just happy to see it on the screen.
Yeah, listen, it's tough enough to get a movie made without carping about what your individual, basically, if you can made a better movie, then you go out and make a movie. You go out and raise $12 million and make this movie.
Put your money where your mouth is and shut the fuck up.
Exactly right.
Okay, Carl, it's time to play interview roulette. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. So you picked 5 numbers before we got started. Now we're going to ask the questions that are correlating to those. The first question you picked was number 12. When people look in your eyes, what do you hope they see?
Compassion and intelligence.
I can see that. Yeah. 122. If you were a superhero, what would your catchphrase be?
There's only one way to do this.
My way. If you could read the mind of one person currently alive, who would it be?
Oh, goodness. Probably, boy, good question. If I could read the mind of one living person. Winston Churchill's not alive anymore. Thomas Edison is gone. Oh, I don't know. The logical choice would be Donald Trump, but that's such a miasma of misinformation and stupidity and arrogance that I wouldn't want to go there.
I imagine it's just one of those wind-up monkeys with symbols in there.
Yeah. Maybe, oh gosh.
Stumped you.
You did. I don't know whose mind I'd like to read.
If you have no answer, that's cool. Well,
I don't have an answer. Cary Grant. not alive.
Well, you mentioned Thomas Edison. Would you like a fun aside about Thomas Edison with me?
Sure.
Okay, so I live in Michigan, right? I live close to Dearborn, where the Henry Ford Museum is.
Right.
Henry Ford, Greenfield Village.
Right.
One of my favorite things to do is to go to the Edison workshop and ask questions about Tesla. I have been asked to leave on numerous occasions for asking questions about Nikolai Tesla.
Tesla was a genius.
He was, and stolen from left and right.
Yep.
Okay. So, what's your favorite word?
My favorite word. God, there are so many. I mean, I live among words. Insouciance.
And the definition?
Casual, kind of a casual, not caring, casually not appearing to care, even though you may care deeply.
Say it again.
Insouciance. It's a
French word?
Yes, French word. INSOUINC, something like that.
It's a beautiful sounding word. Yeah. And then the last question on interview roulette, although I can dig up one more if you want, since you were stumped on that one, but I kind of like the fact that you were stumped on it. The last question is Doritos or Cheetos?
Doritos.
What flavor?
Natural.
Nacho?
Nacho, yeah.
Yeah. That's it, Carl. That's what I've got for you.
Well, pick another one. 165.
Give me 1 second here and I'll pull it up. You said 165?
Mm-hmm.
What's the main thing on your bucket list
Main thing on my bucket list.
that you haven't done yet?
Zip line over the Grand Canyon.
Yeah? That seems like it would be fun. Definitely exhilarating in a rush.
Yep.
Carl, I want to thank you again for being with me.
You're welcome.
I hope you had fun.
It was good for me too.